Welcome to the Six Figure Business Mastery Podcast, where every week, Kirsten and Jeannie dive into the essential topics to fuel your business growth. From copywriting to course creation, mindset to video marketing, they've got you covered. Tune in for expert guest interviews on all things marketing and business, and learn how to work on your business, not just in it. So, get ready to unlock your business potential and take it to the next level.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode. We are very excited to have a special guest. His name is Ryan Holck, and he is a marketer and brand messaging specialist. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan. We can't wait to hear what you have to tell us.
Thank you for a chance to be here. It is great to be able to speak to your audience about some of these important principles today.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm probably most excited about is how much you lean into storytelling as part of the brand. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you came to realize that the story was the most important part of the messaging?
So I started my life post-college in the nonprofit space. And what I really learned in the nonprofit space, I actually didn't start as a marketer. I started as a musician and stumbled into marketing in the process of trying to actually get some events promoted. And it opened a door that, hey, I think actually marketing might be a better fit for me than what I'm currently doing. And what I learned by serving nonprofits for a lot of years was that marketing principles didn't always connect well, but when you could tell a story about an organization or who had been impacted, a volunteer who had served, why a donor felt connected and they gave to an organization, why community members circled around some organizations and not others, I recognized that there were principles in storytelling that helped people connect emotionally with what an organization was doing. And it became very evident that businesses and for-profits could use similar principles because really about 90% of what we do between them is very similar. And so I started bringing some of those principles into the for-profit business and saying, what if we told our story as a business a little different? So it didn't feel like how marketing sometimes feels a little on the slimy side, but it felt more relational. It felt more conversational. And what we found is that people engage with your information differently. They stick on your website longer. They have different kinds of conversations with you in person when they understand what you do, not because it's a product or service, but because they truly understand the heart behind it and how it's going to make life better for people.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I feel like we might have to hire you.
That would be amazing.
We often struggle with our story because what we do is very different than what is in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we help our clients with their marketing, but we do that by helping them with trained virtual assistants who do a lot of the back end work for them. And we don't act as a marketing agency and we don't act as an outsourcing agency. We really operate as coaches. So we're coaching our clients on creating their video content or their podcast or getting booked on podcasts. And we're training them on how to be a good leader to someone halfway around the world. What are their cultural differences? And then how to be a great manager and get all the things you want to get done with your virtual assistant. So I feel like for us, that's a hard messaging because again, it's so different. We're always struggling to tell that story. And then we're two different people with very different voices. So we joke that we bicker 6-year-olds whenever we have to write content together. It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
Yeah, and that is so much part of the challenge is as business owners and leaders, we're so connected with what we do. And it's so easy for the entirety of the story to be in our minds. And we're trying to get all of that information out to the people in front of us. And oftentimes they need, at least initially, 2 or 3 sentences. And that it builds on it conversationally rather than feeling like, oh, I need 5 minutes or you're not going to understand what I do. And most people aren't going to do that, especially online. You've got 7 seconds. And so part of figuring out how to tell your story is it's one thing to tell it this way. It's one thing to go to a network event and share it, be at the chamber, share who you are, what you do. It's a totally other thing to figure out how do I take all those complex things and make it so simple that especially on your website, which is what I like to lean into, it conveys really well who you are and what you do.
I feel like getting the content right for the website is the first start because everything kind of branches off from there. There's social media, there's video content, everything branches off from having a great deal of clarity. And one of the sayings we love is clarity equals velocity. So if you get really clear on your website, it makes it easier to move forward in other areas of your marketing.
I like to say that while the website doesn't answer all of it, it sets you on the path to having greater success in all those areas because you've done the hard work.
Yeah, we used to call the website like your hub because that's where all the deep information is. And then your social media platforms, your email marketing typically bring someone to your website.
I love that imagery because I think of it as the spokes of a wheel, which is very similar to that, where at the end of the day, I want them to come through the digital front door of my business where I have some way, shape, or form matched the experience they would have if I was a brick and mortar, so that they feel like, hey, I've been welcomed here. I'm sure you walked into a business where you don't feel welcome when you walk in the door and you're like, this is just weird. Like, they have what I need, but I'm not sure I want to shop here, versus the opposite, where you go, oh, like, they care I'm here. They want me to be not just buying things, but they actually, care about me as a person. And when we can have that kind of experience online, help people connect at that level, it dramatically changes on how people feel about us and our brand.
Love that.
Very powerful.
So we talked a little bit before. You start with messaging. Tell us a little bit how you help people get to their core message and simplify it in our case.
So I, again, think about this in the context of the website. And I know that there are a couple things on your website that have to be crystal clear for people to grasp them. And the very first one is the very top of the page, what has oftentimes been called the hero section. It's what you see when the page first loads and you've not scrolled. Statistically, the majority of people will never scroll down your page. So what they see when that page loads is the entirety of their knowledge they're going to get about your website. And so I start with that story and say, okay, who is it truly that we are serving? Who is the audience? What product or service are we helping them with? And what win are they going to get? And what I find is, if you can encapsulate your audience, the service, and the win in 2 sentences or less, people engage differently and begin then to go down the page and go deeper into your story and go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and actually learn more about your business. And I like to start with that very first. It's almost an elevator pitch, but it's even shorter because it really is 2 sentences, 7 seconds or less. And I start with that, and then I start building out things in terms of that your audience would know reading, is this really for me? Is this a product or service that I have any interest in? And what are the benefits of it? And what I found is, if you start stacking pieces of your messaging in that way, that it becomes more conversational, and you write it differently. You don't write it from, look at all the cool things that we do. You start thinking about, if I was a person landing on this website and asking, is this product or service for me? What kind of questions would I want to see answered? What kind of solutions, in even the language used, would I use when I Googled this to be found? And all of a sudden it goes from that blank page of, I don't know how to talk about my product or service simply, to, oh, I'm essentially answering the questions that I've already got clients asking me. I'm helping them engage with the content in a little bit different way. So that's why I feel like messaging is so important. And then the second caveat of that is that people don't read every word on your website. They skim content. And so you've got to be thinking, even as you're thinking about specifically your homepage, really, if someone only read the headlines, the bolded sections, would they understand a 30,000-foot view of my business? Would they grasp enough to go, they serve this audience with these kind of products and services, and if I want to engage with them, here's my options, here's the ways to move forward. And that's really why messaging for me is such an important thing. Is it's got to connect, it's got to be simple, and it's got to be skimmable.
Yeah, no kidding. That was a ton of great information. Yeah. So as far as, once you've done your messaging, do you have a vision for how it looks on the screen? Like, are there best practices, or how is it best to illustrate the story?
So there are some best practices, and this is where really I've grown to be more agnostic in terms of what specific tools you're using to build your website, because I've recognized that the tools are a secondary piece. So I like to think of the structure in terms of how that conversation is going to go. And I build things in blocks of content. And part of that is so that it can be written the way it needs to be thought about as a business leader. And the first one for me, then I mentioned the hero section needing to have a quick headline. It has to have a photo that directly correlates and supports whatever we're saying. And one thing that was a trend for a long time, and I'm beginning to see it slide, is businesses would put a cool background photo of what's hanging on my wall at the top of their page, or it would be the beach, or it would be some random thing that had no visual connection to who and what you are. And the challenge of that is, in your 7 seconds, you want what is seen to support the words that are written. So I like to start with that. Is that first impression something that immediately connects the pieces? The other thing is that you want people to be able to take action at any moment on your website, because at the end of the day, we need the leads. We want to make a sale. We want to get people connected to us so we can follow up. And one of the challenges for a lot of businesses is we put some sort of action step, call to action button, something in the upper corner of our menu, and you don't see the next one until you get all the way to the footer. And the problem is most people don't engage content that way. The majority of readers will never get to the bottom of a page. They get half to 3/4 of the way down and they stop. And they also conversely don't pause on a page and scroll back up to reread something unless it like really grabbed them and they're like, did they really say that? I think I need to check that again. And the problem then is if we've only presented our call to action at the top of the page and the bottom of the page, most people who are engaging with us will never see it a second time. And so we've got to make sure we, in the body of our content, are putting options and ways for them to connect. They don't always have to be worded the same. It could be contact us, schedule a call, see it live in action, those type of things. But to be thinking from the standpoint of a visitor, what question would I be trying to answer in my head right now in this section of my website? And what would the appropriate action step be for them to get connected to our business or organization? And so for me, those structure things are super important. And I love to see a lot of pictures of happy, smiling people using your product, or the other extreme of people frustrated without your product or service, so that you can give the flip side then as they move throughout your content, so that you've got some visual tension that's created even as they're wrestling through their problem or whatever it is that you serve. But really, that's why I say structure is I want to see specific sections that are calling people to action and making it super easy to skim down that page and track with the story that's being told.
Love that. Do you recommend that people use video on their homepage of their website or not?
I love a good video. And because I came out of the nonprofit space, I have seen the power of what happens when a story is told with clarity in video and how it connects with people emotionally. The caveat to that is that the top loading section of your page is not the place to put a video that is important and you want people to view because of that 7-second rule. If they engage with your content, they will not sit and park at the top of your page. They will immediately stop scrolling, which means your video most likely will never be watched beyond the 15-second mark. So you want to still at the top, but that video, half to 3/4 of the way down the page, especially if you can reinforce something that you've immediately talked about, like you've explained how your process works, your services work. Now you're going to hear from someone we actually served who went through that process and they have seen tremendous movement forward and it's actually worked in their business or their life. And here's how it's better. Those kind of stories, those take people from the objections of, I'm not sure if this is really going to work for me, to, oh my goodness, that's my story too. I see myself in it. Now I can dive in and click and go further. So make sure if you're going to share a video like that, that you have a call to action button right next to that video, that if this connected with you, here's the action I want you to take right now.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think we all get, like you said, sometimes we're too close to our own content, so we don't always think things through the way we should. These are two great takeaways right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you have recommendations for the rest of the website, or do you just focus on the homepage? I know the homepage is the one that's the most viewed.
I really focus on the entirety of the site. And I would say that in my mind, there are at least 5 core pages that would well serve the majority of at least small businesses out there. The homepage being one of them, a about us page where you dive in a little further into the origin story of why you exist and why your business is around. A services page that oftentimes we hint at our services and our service packages on the homepage, but to give an entire explanation takes way too much space typically on a homepage. And so I like to have a services page where people can really dive into all of the types of things you offer. Those may even break out into additional pages, but at least that there's a services page, that there's a contact or a schedule, book a call kind of page. There has to be a way for people to interact with you at a digital fashion, unless you're a brick and mortar and you just want phone calls, but most places want contact of some sort. And you've got to have a lead magnet page, something that you are offering that's of value, and it sits on its own page so that when you have conversations with people, you don't have to send them to the homepage and say, if you scroll 3/4 of the way down the page, you're going to see this pop-up that comes up, and don't close the pop-up. That X, ignore the X, fill out the box. Too many steps. I've already confused people. Go to my website /workshop, and you're going to get the resource you want and need to solve this problem in your business. When you can do those 5 pages and speak with that kind of clarity, it just helps bridge the gap with people. and helps people connect, because we're all busy. It's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't want to be interested. We're going on to the next thing or thinking about the next phone call, or we go to the next phone call and we meant to make a connection and we've already forgotten where we were supposed to go and can't find the email. And so any way that we can help people really connect quickly with your content helps.
So do you recommend a pop-up on the homepage?
I have historically always recommended a pop-up that is delayed in its delivery so that it doesn't happen in the first half second, because I know if I truly have 7 seconds to capture their attention, I don't want to lose 2 of those to a pop-up that might block the information that is so critical to being connected with. So it's got to be on a delay. That said, Google, in their recent changes about content engagement, has begun to say we don't like pop-ups. And I have not personally seen the numbers in terms of how that's changing site engagement yet, but it is something to be aware of, that if you can have a less obtrusive that slides in from the bottom, that does across the top, that sometimes they're called a ribbon, they go by a different couple names, but slides in, slides similarly from the bottom kind of thing, I think it's completely appropriate to share resources like that. Even if I've got something like that on the homepage, I will oftentimes have a section that's a small version of it, but something that at least says, here's a way to connect with us for a resource. We're going to give you something in exchange for an email. So there's this tension. But yeah, usually I like to have a pop-up. I think most people expect that there's going to be a freebie of some sort. So make it easy to find.
What about a chatbot?
Oh, chatbots. So I have a love-hate relationship personally with chatbots. I have seen them done phenomenally well. And I feel like it's actually a person answering qualitative questions on the other end. That said, there's a lot of chatbots that aren't great, or that rely on someone in real time to be waiting for the chatbot to be fired. And that's where I've seen the challenge. Is I put chatbots on a number of sites at one point, and we powered them all with Facebook Messenger. And the problem was, if you set your phone down and didn't have notifications on loud enough, we were losing leads, because people would come and ask questions and we wouldn't see it for half an hour. And because it was Facebook Messenger and you weren't friends yet, it didn't show up in your regular chat feed. So they didn't know when you finally got back to them. And so if they didn't go up and click I forget what the tab is, but essentially the people you aren't yet connected to, and open that chat window, they never saw the conversation, and like leads were just going out the door. And so I've seen them done well. I've seen them done poorly more times than I've seen them done well. And I do know that AI is helping with that tremendously right now, because you can train, but I also know there's some legal ramifications right now for AIs that have shared information that was incorrect and people acted on it and then came back and said, but your bot told me to do it. And actually, in the state of California, there's some legal action against a government-connected entity because their bot shared information that was not in alignment with actually what the rules and laws in their area were. And so there is some tension with that. So the long and short for me is, I'd rather not use a bot. I'd rather use get them into a text message plan or something where someone can actually, whether you're doing every interaction, you at least can monitor it, or you start the process as a chat and you quickly move them into a real conversation with people. Because chat's great for FAQs. It's not always great for continuing relationship development.
Those are all really important things to be reminded of, that people are visiting your site from other countries, from other states, and everybody's got their own rules. Yeah, that's really important to be mindful of.
And I will say that people visit at odd times of day. One of the sites and businesses that I work with is a residential care facility. We found very quickly, based on the stat, that the families looking for care facilities began their searches after 8 p.m. and they often ran until 1 or 2 in the morning. It was when the family member had paused long enough and the kids were down and they're thinking about mom and dad and how do we find a solution. The contact forms blew up after 10 p.m. And so we all of a sudden went, schedule a call does not work. Call in real time does not work. Like, we have got to be thinking a chatbot that we aren't going to see till tomorrow morning is not going to work. Part of it is just knowing that as well. When do you anticipate your people are going to actually visit and engage with your website so that you're offering the right kind of follow-up option?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Ryan, this has been amazing. Like, I'm so glad we've had this conversation. We were going to be updating our website before long, maybe rebuilding it completely. So we may be in touch with you.
I love it. Glad to have that kind of conversation.
Yay. If people want to get in touch with you, how would you have them go about doing that?
So the best way to get a hold of me is at distillyourstory.com. And there you're going to find some resources. You'll find a pop-up that for a website audit, actually that's a messaging audit, that if you feel like your site is maybe struggling or you feel like you're getting crickets, people just aren't engaging, you're not getting leads at the volume that you thought, it's a 10-minute way to do a quick personal assessment of your site and figure out, are we hitting some key markers? And if not, then I know I probably need to have someone help or work on some things. So that's a great place to find that. I also run a messaging cohort, actually finishing one of those up this week, where I work with business leaders and we figure out, how are we going to tell your story clearly, and how are we going to make sure that at least the 5 key pages of your site tell it so that people engage with you. So distillyourstory.com is going to be the best place to find info about those things.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes for everyone to be able to grab that link.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for listening to the Six Figure Business Mastery Podcast. If you enjoyed listening to this episode and you are ready to leverage video marketing on all online platforms, or maybe even start your own video podcast, then you need to check out the Done For You and Done With You program at themarketingvaadvantage.com and take your business to the next level.